When we decided to move to St. Augustine, the oldest city in the United States, we just wanted a fresh start. We found a charming old house at an unbelievable price. It seemed perfect, large, full of history, and completely quiet. The real estate agent told us that the house had been empty for years. "No one has stayed here for long," he said, laughing nervously. I didn't care. I liked the quiet, and after years of hustle and bustle in the big city, it felt like a refuge. The first few days were peaceful. The old walls, covered in worn wallpaper, seemed to embrace us with a nostalgic feeling. The wood creaked slightly under our footsteps, but other than that, the silence was total. No outside sounds, no night noises. It was as if the house were isolated from the world. The first night, I noticed something strange. When I went to close the windows, I noticed that the air was still. No wind was blowing outside, not the slightest rustle of the trees. The city seemed to have frozen. "Did you hear that?" I asked my wife later. "Heard what?" she replied, frowning. "Exactly, nothing, not even the sound of the wind." We laughed, trying to ignore it, but the silence began to weigh on us, as if it had a presence of its own, watching our every move. On the third night, I woke up in the middle of the night. The silence seemed deeper, denser. I got up to get a glass of water, and as I walked through the living room, I noticed something strange. All the chairs were facing the wall. I stood there, staring at it for a few seconds. I didn't remember doing that. The next day, I asked my wife if she had moved the chairs. She looked at me with a confused expression. "No." "Why?" I decided to ignore it. Maybe I was just tired and had moved the chairs without realizing it. But that night, the silence was broken. It started as a distant murmur, like a whispered conversation between two people. It seemed to come from the walls, slowly growing louder until it filled the room. I stood up again, this time with my heart racing. I walked into the hallway and looked around. No one. That was when I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from upstairs. I tried to turn on the light, but the switch wouldn't work. The sound of the footsteps stopped right at the top of the stairs, and a chill filled the house, chilling the air. "Is anyone there?" My voice echoed in the darkness, and for a second, everything was silent again. Then a soft, drawling voice whispered, very close to my ear, "You shouldn't have come." My body froze. The whisper still echoed in my mind, soft and cold, like an icy breath. "You shouldn't have come." My breathing became heavy. The footsteps started again, closer now, slowly descending the stairs. Each step seemed louder than the last, breaking the oppressive silence that dominated the house. The hallway was dark, and no matter how hard I tried to see, there was nothing but darkness. It was then that the lights flickered for a second, illuminating enough for me to see a silhouette standing at the top of the stairs, tall, thin, with her head tilted to the side. I didn't move. My heart was hammering in my chest, and the air around me seemed thicker and thicker. "You shouldn't be here," the voice sounded again, this time coming from inside the wall. My reaction was instinctive. I ran through the living room, tripping over the chairs still facing the wall, and threw myself against the front door, trying to open it. Locked. The key was in place, but it wouldn't turn. That was when I heard the most disturbing sound yet. Laughter. It was soft, almost childlike, but filled with something that wasn't human. It came from the hallway, and the sound grew closer and closer. The house seemed alive, as if the environment itself wanted to keep me inside. I looked back and saw that all the doors were open, wide open, revealing dark rooms that had previously been closed. At the back of each one, shadows danced, forming figures that seemed to watch me, motionless and hungry. The silence returned suddenly, but this time it was even heavier, as if it were swallowing me. My ears rang, and the air turned cold. The door behind me slowly opened with a long, deep creak. I stood still, unable to move. I felt an icy hand touch my shoulder. "Look at me," the voice whispered. I closed my eyes, my entire body shaking. I knew I couldn't look. If I did, I would never leave that house again. I gathered all the courage I had left and ran outside, without looking back. The night air enveloped me, but the feeling of being watched didn't go away. I crossed the garden, certain that something was at the door, watching me with its gaze. When I reached the sidewalk, I looked at the house once more. The door was closed again. The windows were dark, but on the second floor, I saw a pale face watching me. It smiled before disappearing into the shadows. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in my house seemed amplified. Every shadow seemed to hide something. The silence was never the same again. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I still hear distant murmurs, followed by footsteps that stop at my bedroom door. And every time this happens, a voice whispers softly, as if waiting for me. Look at me, just one more time. I have always been passionate about art, so when I was offered the opportunity to take care of an old mansion in Newport, Rhode Island, during a period of restoration, I accepted without hesitation. The mansion was huge, with winding hallways, high ceilings, and dozens of old paintings on the walls, depicting figures from bygone eras. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary at first. I arrived late in the afternoon. The sun was slowly setting, painting the house with an orange glow. The hallways were quiet, and the sound of my footsteps echoed faintly. I was given a room on the second floor, next to a gallery filled with portraits of the mansion's former owners. The paintings were impressive, almost mesmerizing. The eyes of the subjects seemed to follow me, but I thought it was just the realism of the brushstrokes. The first night, the silence was absolute. There was no sound of wind or distant cars, just the soft ticking of an antique clock in the living room. I fell asleep peacefully. Around 3 in the morning, I woke up with a strange feeling, as if someone was watching me. I sat up in bed, trying to figure out what was bothering me. The room was dark, except for a faint light coming from the hallway. When I looked toward the door, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The closest painting was facing me. In the hallway, where it had previously hung facing the opposite wall, the painting was now facing me directly. The portrait showed a woman in a black dress with empty eyes, her face tilted slightly to the side, as if she were curious. I tried to convince myself that someone must have moved the painting, but who would do that in the middle of the night? I got up slowly, my heart racing. As I got closer, I noticed something even stranger. The woman's face seemed to have changed slightly since the last time I had seen the painting. At that moment, a cold breeze passed through the hallway, and the lights flickered. The painting trembled slightly, as if it were alive, and then, I swear I saw the woman blink. My feet were rooted to the ground, unable to move. The painting now showed the woman with a faint smile, her eyes fixed on me as if she was pleased to have my attention. Before I could react, I heard a soft whisper coming from somewhere inside the wall. "You can be a part of it too." I wanted to run, but my feet were stuck to the ground, as if something invisible was holding me back. The painting in front of me seemed more and more real. The woman's smile had grown, and her eyes, previously just painted, shone in the dim light of the hallway. "You can be a part of it too," the voice repeated, soft and mesmerizing, like an invitation impossible to refuse. I gathered what little courage I had left and took a step back. The painting shook again, and a crack appeared in the glass that protected it. Before I could think, I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, dragging, heavy. I turned around quickly, but the hallway was empty. Only, something had changed. All the other paintings were also turned towards me. There were dozens of them, each one depicting a different figure. Men, women, and children, all with eyes that followed my every move. The feeling of being watched was unbearable. I ran down the hallway, dodging the shadows that seemed to stretch across the walls. I passed several paintings that, at a glance, showed different faces than the ones I had seen before, as if each one of them was transforming. Finally, I reached the gallery door and pushed it open hard, stepping out into the main room. The house was plunged into silence again, but now the air was thick and cold. I glanced at the antique clock on the wall. The hands had stopped at 3 in the morning, the same time it had all started. It was then that I noticed something disturbing. My reflection in the glass of the door was different. In the reflection, my face looked distorted. My smile was too wide, and my eyes were empty, like those of the figures in the paintings. I took a step back, but the reflection remained motionless, still staring at me, its head tilted slightly to the side, as if studying my reaction. Suddenly, an icy hand touched my shoulder. I turned quickly, but there was no one there, only the echo of a low laugh, which seemed to come from within the walls. My eyes returned to the reflection, and this time, the reflection blinked. "You already belong to us," the voice whispered once more, and then everything went dark. The next morning, I woke up on the living room floor, my body cold and my clothes covered in dust. The paintings were all in place, as if nothing had happened. But when I looked again at the painting of the woman, I realized that she was no longer smiling. Since that day, I have never entered that mansion again. But even far from it, something continues to haunt me. Reflections seem to watch me back, and sometimes, at night, I hear soft footsteps in the hallways of my house, and every time I pass by a mirror or a window, I see the reflection smiling, as if it were waiting for the right moment to replace me. I've always been intrigued by urban stories, especially haunted houses. So when I moved to San Francisco and heard about an old Victorian house where the lights never went out, I knew I had to see it for myself. They said no one had lived there for decades, but every night at exactly midnight, the lights would turn on by themselves. It was just a legend, I thought. But something about the story made me uneasy. The first night, I parked my car across the street, prepared to wait until midnight to see for myself. The house was huge, with tall windows and an ivy-covered facade. The curtains were closed, but for some reason, the house seemed to be watching me. At 11:59 p.m., everything was dark and quiet, but as soon as the clock struck midnight, all at once the lights in the windows came on. My heart raced. I kept waiting for someone to appear, for a shadow to pass by the window, or for a door to open, but nothing happened. The lights stayed on for a few minutes, and then went out again, as if they had never been turned on. The next day, I asked a neighbor about the house. He gave me a strange look before answering. "No one has lived there for over 50 years. But I saw the lights come on last night," I insisted. He shook his head, his expression tense. "It's best not to get involved. Anyone who tries to find out what's going on there ends up disappearing." That night, I went back. I couldn't resist. Something about the house was calling me. At 11:55 p.m., I parked again, this time closer. The street was deserted and silent, and the cold breeze carried the smell of dust and old wood. At midnight, the lights came back on, but this time, one of the windows on the second floor was open, and I could clearly see a motionless figure standing in the window, watching me. My heart sank. For an instant, the figure disappeared, but before I could react, the front door slowly opened, as if inviting me in. That was when I heard a whisper coming from inside the house. "Come, we're waiting." The open door seemed to beckon me, as if the house itself were waiting for me. My mind told me to leave, but my legs moved on their own. I crossed the street, my heart racing, the silence around me almost suffocating. When I reached the door, a cold breeze enveloped me. The air was heavy, with the strong smell of old wood and something rotten, as if the house had not been opened for a long time. I entered slowly, trying to control my breathing. The entrance hall was lit by a large antique chandelier. The lights flickered softly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The furniture was covered in white sheets, and the floor creaked beneath my feet. "Is someone here?" My voice echoed through the house, but no answer came. Then I heard the sound. Footsteps upstairs. They were light but clear, as if someone was walking calmly from one room to another. I glanced up the stairs and saw a shadow cast on the wall at the top, the silhouette of a person standing still. "Who's there?" I asked again, my voice shaking. The shadow moved slowly, disappearing down the hallway. Against all my instincts, I started up the stairs. Each step seemed louder than the last, and the sound of my footsteps mixed with the echoes of the ones I had heard before. At the top of the stairs, the hallway was lit by a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. The doors were all open, revealing empty, dark rooms. But at the end of the hallway, the last door was ajar, with a dim light flickering inside. I approached slowly, my heart beating so loudly it seemed to echo in the silence. When I pushed open the door, the room was empty, except for a rocking chair in the center, rocking gently. It was then that I realized the walls were covered in mirrors. I looked at the closest one and my reflection was there, but it wasn't me. In the mirror, my own version was smiling, a wide, unnatural smile that grew wider and wider as his eyes darkened until they were completely black. The reflection raised his hand, waving slowly, and then, without moving his mouth, whispered directly into my mind, "You belong to us now." The glass in the mirror began to crack, a web of fissures spreading rapidly. I tried to look away, but my feet were stuck to the floor. That's when I heard the sound behind me, the door closing by itself. The room plunged into darkness. The last sound I heard before everything went silent was the soft laughter coming from all the mirrors at once. When I woke up, I was lying on the sidewalk in front of the house. The sky was beginning to lighten, and the lights in the house were off. I got up slowly, my body aching, my head spinning. I looked at the house one more time. In the second-floor window, the same silhouette was there, watching me, but now, with the same smile as my reflection in the mirror. Since that night, something has changed in me. Sometimes, when I pass by a mirror, I see that same smile for a brief second, even when I'm not smiling, and I always hear the whisper, soft and constant, "Come back, the house is still waiting." The house was old, but it had character. I bought the property in Baltimore, thinking it would be a good renovation project, a chance to start over. It was a Victorian, with tall windows and a huge attic. The realtor warned me that no one had lived there for over 40 years, but I thought it was just a curiosity of no importance. The first week, everything was quiet. I spent my days painting the walls and tidying up the rooms. The attic, however, always made me uncomfortable. The door to it was locked, and the key seemed to have disappeared long ago. Every night before I went to sleep, I would feel a strange presence coming from above, as if the attic were alive. The air in that part of the house was always colder, and sometimes, in the middle of the night, I would hear soft footsteps on the ceiling, as if someone were walking up there. On the third night, I woke up at 3 in the morning to an even more disturbing sound, a voice whispering my name. "Lucas." My spine shivered. I lay there, my heart pounding, trying to convince myself that it was just my imagination. But the whisper kept coming. "Lucas, come here." I slowly got up, my hands sweating, and went into the hallway. The sound was coming straight from the attic, behind the locked door. I put my ear to the wood and heard a low, almost childish laugh, followed by 3 sharp knocks on the door. I took a step back, trying to understand what was happening. It was then that the door creaked softly, opening by itself a few inches. "Come up, we're waiting." The darkness of the attic seemed to beckon me, as if it had its own weight. I grabbed the flashlight on my cell phone and slowly climbed the first few steps. The air grew colder with each step. The smell of dust and old wood was suffocating. When I reached the top of the stairs, I saw the attic for the first time. It was bigger than I had imagined, with furniture covered in sheets, old boxes, and a rocking chair in the center. The chair was facing the window, rocking slightly, as if someone had just stepped out of it. My entire body felt goosebumps. Suddenly, the sound came back. "Lucas, we're here." I looked around, shining the flashlight into every corner. It was then that I saw something that made me catch my breath. Footprints on the dusty floor. They started from the rocking chair and went toward the back wall. The wall was cracked, as if something was hiding behind it. Before I could move, the flashlight flickered and went out, plunging everything into darkness. Then, I heard the voice again, right behind me. "You shouldn't be here." The voice was so close it felt like it was whispering directly into my ear. "You shouldn't be here." My body froze, and the air around me grew so cold that my breath came out in steam. The flashlight flickered again, illuminating the attic for a second. It was enough for me to see something that made me freeze. The rocking chair was no longer empty. A figure sat in it, a pale child with dark eyes and a wide, crooked smile. She rocked slowly, watching me silently. "Do you want to play?" she asked, her voice thin and slurred. I took a step back, trying to stay calm, but the floor creaked beneath my feet, and the sound was like a trigger. The figure rose from the chair in a sudden movement, so fast it seemed to float, and stopped a few feet away from me. "Why are you running away?" she whispered, her head tilting to the side. The boxes around me began to move on their own, falling off the shelves, while the rocking chair spun around without anyone touching it. The sound of footsteps echoed throughout the attic, coming from several directions at once. I ran. I almost stumbled down the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. When I reached the hallway, the attic door slammed behind me, shaking the entire house. Silence returned, but my instincts told me that I was still not safe. I ran to the living room, trying to grab my cell phone, but the screen was frozen with a single message written in red letters. "We are with you." It was then that I heard the footsteps again. Only this time, they were coming from the hallway, directly towards me. Before I could react, the lights in the house went out, and the only thing that remained was the sound of children's laughter, getting closer and closer. The next morning, I woke up in the entrance of the house, my body cold and my mind confused. The attic was locked again, as if it had never been opened. I tried to convince myself that it had all been a dream, but the footprints were still there, and the echo of the voice remained in my mind. Since then, the nights have never been peaceful. Sometimes I hear footsteps on the ceiling, or a low laugh coming from the attic, always around 3 in the morning. And sometimes I see the shadow of someone standing at the top of the stairs, waiting for me to go up again. But I never go up, never again. The house was simple, but perfect for me. An old building in Portland, Maine, with rustic charm and an incredible view of the woods. I bought the house without thinking twice, eager to start a new phase in my life. The realtor mentioned that the basement had never been used, but honestly, that didn't bother me. The first week, things were peaceful. I spent my days arranging furniture and getting used to the silence of the area. The basement remained locked at all times, and despite my curiosity, I left the door closed. Something about the place made me uncomfortable. Then, one cold night, around 2 in the morning, I heard it for the first time. A soft, distant cry. I got out of bed, thinking it was the wind blowing through the windows, but the sound was too clear to be that. It was a child's cry, coming from the back of the house, right where the basement door was. I stood in the hallway, listening carefully. The sound was faint, but continuous, as if someone was crying silently, waiting to be heard. My heart raced, and my mind tried to find a logical explanation. Maybe it was an animal trapped down there. With shaking hands, I turned on the hallway light and walked to the basement door. The crying grew louder as I approached, each step increasing the pressure in my chest. When I placed my hand on the cold doorknob, the sound stopped abruptly. The silence was even more frightening. I slowly turned the key and opened the door. A smell of damp and old wood filled the air, making me recoil for a second. I shined the flashlight on my cell phone on the stairs and slowly descended. Each step creaked, and the feeling of being watched accompanied me with each step. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, the flashlight illuminated the space. The basement was empty. There were only a few old boxes and a wooden chair leaning against the wall. "Is anyone here?" I asked, my voice echoing through the empty space. No answer. I was about to head back upstairs when I heard it again, the crying behind me. I turned quickly, shining my light on the brick wall. It was then that I noticed something strange. There were small handprints in the dust on the floor, starting in the corner and going straight to the chair. Before I could react, the basement door slammed shut, and the crying turned into a low, disturbing laugh. The basement door slammed so hard that the sound echoed through the space, leaving me paralyzed for a few seconds. The laughter continued, low and distant, but now it seemed to be everywhere at once, enveloping every corner of the basement. I ran to the door, trying to open it, but the handle wouldn't turn. It was locked, stuck as if someone outside had decided to keep me there. The air grew colder, and the feeling that I wasn't alone grew stronger by the second. The flashlight on my cell phone flickered, casting unstable shadows on the brick walls. I looked at the corner where the chair had been. It was gone. My heart raced. A scuff mark in the dust showed that the chair had been moved, but to where? "Who's there?" I shouted, trying to keep my voice steady. The crying came again, this time louder and more desperate, as if someone was right next to me. When I turned the flashlight toward the sound, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A small, pale figure, huddled in the dark corner of the basement, rocking back and forth. "Please, help me," it whispered, its voice weak and broken. I took a step back, my heart hammering in my chest. The figure slowly raised its head, revealing a deformed, eyeless face, its mouth distorted into a wide, frightening smile. "You shouldn't have come down here," it said, its voice now deep and filled with something that sounded like hatred and satisfaction at the same time. The crying mixed with laughter, and the figure began moving toward me, not walking, but gliding across the floor, its feet never touching the ground. I ran to the door again, kicking it hard, trying to break it down. The sound of my knocking mixed with the laughter and whispers coming from all sides. Finally, the door burst open, almost knocking me to the floor. I ran up the stairs, tripping on the steps, and when I reached the hallway, I slammed the basement door shut and locked it again. Silence returned, but the air still felt heavy, as if something was on the other side, waiting. The next morning, the door was ajar again. The handprints were still there, but now they seemed more numerous, scattered all over the walls of the basement. Since that day, I have never gone down there again. Sometimes, at night, I still hear the distant crying, mixed with laughter, always at the same time, always at 2 in the morning. And sometimes, the wooden chair appears in different places in the house, as if it were waiting for me. But I never approach it, because I know that if I look too closely, I will see that figure smiling at me again, and next time, she won't let me leave. The Blackwater Swamp has always been a strange place. Mist creeps across the water like invisible fingers, and it's never completely quiet. Even without wind, the trees creak. Even without people, you always feel like you're being watched. My name is Ethan, and I'm an investigative reporter. I went to Blackwater to report on the disappearance of the Lamort Circus, a traveling troupe that mysteriously vanished in 1923. There was no fire, no attack. The performers, the animals, the tents, everything disappeared without explanation. The only thing left was a trail of footprints that ended in the middle of nowhere, and from time to time, some locals claimed to see the circus lights shining into the swamp. I decided to find out the truth. I arrived at the swamp as night fell. The humidity clung to my skin, and the air smelled of old mud and rotting leaves. With a flashlight in one hand and a camera in the other, I followed a barely visible path through the twisted trees. The locals had warned me, if you hear laughter, run. I thought it was an exaggeration, until I heard it, faint, distant, but real. I kept walking. With each step, the sound grew louder. First laughter, then the tinkling of bells. Then, in the middle of the fog, I saw it, a red and gold arch, old and faded, with the words written in worn letters, Circus La Morte, the show never ends. My heart raced. This was not possible. The circus was there. The colorful tents rose in the middle of the swamp, glowing in an impossible yellow light. The rusty Ferris wheel turned slowly. The sound of drums echoed in the air, but there was no one there, or at least that's what I thought, because when I blinked, the lights came on at the same time, and the entrance to the main tent opened by itself. The entrance to the main tent swung open by itself. My blood ran cold. The wind howled through the trees, but inside everything was quiet. No voices, no movement, only the warm glow of dim lights illuminating the interior of the canvas. The warning from the locals echoed in my mind, if you hear laughter, run. But I had already heard it, and now I couldn't leave. I took a hesitant step into the tent. The smell of old straw and rust was strong. The stands were empty, covered in a thin layer of dust. In the center, the round ring looked intact, as if time had not touched the place. Then I heard a sound, the sound of applause, coming from nowhere. My eyes darted around the empty stands. The sound continued, rhythmic clapping, an invisible audience clapping for a show that didn't exist. My throat went dry. That was when the curtain at the back of the ring opened, and someone came out. A clown, tall, thin, wearing a worn black and white suit. His face was painted white, with a red smile stretching beyond his lips, but his eyes were completely black. He looked at me and bowed slowly. The show never ends. The voice didn't come from his mouth. It came from the empty stands. I felt my body freeze. Something was wrong with this place. The clown took a step forward, and then all the lights went out at once. The circus disappeared into darkness, and for a moment, everything was silent, until I felt it. Something behind me. The back of my neck prickled. A cold whisper whispered against my ear. You're part of the show now. I tried to run. My legs wouldn't obey. The invisible applause came again, louder, frenetic, and then the lights flickered again. But now the stands were no longer empty. They were full. Hundreds of figures sat in the darkness. No faces, no eyes, just shadows applauding nonstop. My body shook. I had to get out of there. I turned to run, but the clown was already in front of me. He smiled wider. His empty eyes stared at me. The show never ends. The darkness swallowed me. The next morning, the residents of Blackwater saw something strange in the middle of the swamp. An old poster hanging from a twisted tree. On it was a blurred image of a terrified man in the ring, and at the bottom, red-stained letters formed a single sentence, "New artist coming soon." The Hollow Circus closed 20 years ago. The authorities claim it was due to financial problems, but the locals know the truth. A boy disappeared on the last night of the show. There were no traces, no evidence of escape or kidnapping. Only one thing was found inside the main tent the next morning, a bloody clown nose in the middle of the ring. Since then, no one has dared to enter there. But I am not like the others. I am curious, and that night, I decided to enter. Crossing the ruins of the circus was easier than I imagined. The boards that surrounded the grounds were broken, rotting with time. The icy wind blew hard, shaking the remains of red and gold canvas. The silence there was not normal. It was a silence that watched. The big tent of the ring was still standing, torn, tilted, but strangely intact. I took a deep breath and stepped through the entrance. The air inside was heavier. It smelled of dust, rotting wood, and something sweet. The bleachers were covered in thick dust, but there was something strange about them. I blinked. There were marks, like someone had sat there recently. My chest tightened. This didn't make sense. But before I could process it, I heard a sound, a rustle of fabric. I turned the flashlight toward the center of the ring. My heart stopped. Sitting there, with his back to me, was a clown. His blue and white outfit was faded. His collar was dirty. His head tilted slightly to the side. He wasn't moving, but I felt like he knew I was there. I swallowed hard. "Hello?" My voice echoed through the empty tent. The clown didn't respond. I took a step back. That's when he turned his head to me and smiled. The clown smiled. My body froze. His sunken black eyes were empty, as if there were no soul inside them. His cracked, dry lips curved in a smile that seemed impossible for a human face. The silence in the tent grew heavier. Then, he moved. Slowly, he stood up. His dirty, faded clothes rustled, as if the fabric was stuck to his body. His movements were awkward, as if he didn't know how to walk properly. My heart hammered inside my chest. I wanted to run, but my legs were rooted to the spot. The clown took a step forward. I took a step back. He laughed. Low, slurred. The flashlight trembled in my hand. The light wavered, casting strange shadows across the empty stands. Then, he was gone. My breath caught. I looked around, trying to find any sign of him. The tent was empty, but something was wrong. I felt a chill on the back of my neck. Someone was behind me. I turned slowly. Nothing. Then I saw the dressing room mirror at the back of the tent, and my reflection was not alone. The clown was behind me. His deep black eyes, reflected in the glass, seemed to laugh at my confusion. My chest tightened. This couldn't be real. But then he began to move, slowly, from within the reflection, and he stepped out of the mirror. My flashlight went out. Darkness filled the tent. The only sound was his breathing, weak, wet. Then I felt it. Ice fingers landing on my shoulder. My entire body went paralyzed, and his voice whispered in my ear, "Now there's room for one more in the show." A low laugh echoed through the tent. The darkness pulled me in. The next morning, some curious people passed by the old circus. The tent was still there, forgotten in time, but something was different. Now, there were two silhouettes sitting in the ring, two clowns, and at night, if you listened carefully, you could hear two laughs echoing in the wind. The Blackmore Circus doesn't exist. At least that's what they say. There's no record of it in any newspaper, no advertisement, no photo. But every now and then, someone finds a mysterious note lying on the ground, on a park bench, or stuck in a doorway. And those who do find it disappear. I never believed these stories until I found a note. It was a cold night in St. Louis. I was walking home from work late, taking a shortcut down a deserted street, when I saw something strange, a piece of paper floating in the air. It didn't fall slowly, like a normal piece of paper. It seemed to move on its own. I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. The note slid to my feet. I bent down and picked it up. It was old, yellowed, with faded red letters. Blackmore Circus, a show like no other, admission only, midnight. I turned the note over. No address, no date, just a strange hand-drawn symbol, an eye inside a triangle. I frowned, probably a prank, but even so I felt a shiver. Something inside me told me to throw it away, but I didn't. And at midnight, the note began to glow. I woke up to a noise. I was lying in bed, but something felt wrong. I looked at the nightstand. The note was there, glowing a faint reddish hue. My stomach churned. This didn't make sense. I picked up the paper. It was warm. Then I heard laughter, software distant, but coming from outside. I got up and went to the window. My street looked different. Where before there had been dark buildings and empty sidewalks, now there were lights, colorful tents, a slowly spinning Ferris wheel, a lit-up ticket booth. My heart raced. That hadn't been there before. I blinked, trying to make sense of it. In the glow of the lights, I saw someone standing at the entrance to the main tent. Tall, thin, wearing a dark red suit and a wide-brimmed hat. He wasn't moving, but I knew he was looking right at me. My throat went dry. I had to get out of there. But when I turned to gather my things, the ticket was gone, and behind me, in the mirror, the man in the red suit was smiling. The man in the red suit stood in my mirror, smiling. My skin crawled. My entire body screamed at me not to move, but I couldn't look away. His mouth was too big. His teeth were sharp and yellow. His eyes were black as glass. Then he raised a hand and knocked on the glass. Knock, knock, knock. My reflection didn't move, but he did. My chest tightened. This wasn't possible. And then the glass began to crack. First a thin line, then several, spreading like roots. The reflection flickered, and when I looked again, I wasn't in my room anymore. The smell of rotten cotton candy and rust filled my nostrils. Dust billowed into the air. The dirt floor creaked beneath my feet. I was inside the circus. The colorful tents rose up around me, lit by old lanterns. The Ferris wheel spun slowly, its cabin swaying as if it were full. But I was alone. The silence was not normal. It was heavy, as if something was there, watching me. Suddenly, the lights in the main tent came on. The entrance opened with a snap, and a deep voice echoed through the air. The show is about to begin. My legs trembled as I walked through the tent's entrance. The ring was huge, covered in dark sawdust. The stands were full, but not with people. They were mannequins, hundreds of them, sitting still, with blank expressions. Some had smiling mouths, others seemed to be screaming. Fear burned inside me. What the hell was that? Then I heard the applause, low at first, then louder. The mannequins clapped. Panic gripped me. I had to get out of there. But then, the curtains of the ring parted, and he appeared, the man in the red suit. He walked to the center of the ring, his shoes gleaming in the dim light. The smile never left his face. "Welcome to Blackmore Circus," he said, spreading his arms. "You've accepted the invitation. You're now part of the show." The applause grew louder, and then the stands began to move. The mannequins stood up. My muscles locked. They were coming toward me. "I don't want this," I screamed. "I never accepted." The man laughed. "But you took the ticket." My legs finally responded. I ran for the exit. But when I reached the door, there were only more stands. There was no way out of the circus. I felt cold hands touch my shoulders. The mannequins were all around me. "Help us," a voice whispered. I looked to the side and saw something that made me stifle a scream. The mannequins had human faces, the faces of missing people, people who had found the ticket, people who had never left. The darkness pulled me in. The last sound I heard was applause, and the last thing I saw was the man in the red suit, smiling. The show never ends. The next morning, a man was walking through St. Louis when he saw a piece of paper floating on the sidewalk. He picked it up. It was a yellowed ticket. Blackmore Circus, a show like no other. Admission only, midnight. He smiled, thinking it was a joke. He folded the note and put it in his pocket. And that night, at midnight, the circus appeared again. I should never have gone back to that park. When I was a kid, Lone Star Fun Park was my favorite place. The bright lights, the colorful rides, the smell of popcorn and cotton candy. But one night, everything changed. A child disappeared there, and no one ever found her. The park closed shortly after, abandoned in a hurry, as if everyone wanted to forget. But I never forgot, and that night, I decided to go back. The rusty fence creaked as I walked through a gap in the fence. The park was rotting, eaten away by time. The smell of rust and old wood filled the air. The rides were covered in moss, some toppled over, others rotting silently. But the Ferris wheel was still there, tall, rusty, leaning to one side, but intact. And then it moved. My lungs seized. The Ferris wheel spun a little, just enough to rock one of the cabins. The wind? Maybe. But there was no wind. The night was dead. I clutched the flashlight in my hand. I needed to get a closer look. I walked past the wrecked rides, past bumper cars sunk into the ground and eyeless carousel horses. With each step, the air felt heavier. I reached the base of the Ferris wheel. The ladder to the top was still there. I looked up. The empty cabin swayed gently, and then I heard it. A laugh, low, childish. A chill ran down my spine. The laugh came from above, from inside the Ferris wheel. My fingers went numb. I swallowed hard. I looked again. The empty cabins seemed darker now, and that was when I saw it. A small white hand gripped the iron of the highest booth, still, not moving, too small to be an adult's. The air froze around me, and the laughter grew louder. The laughter grew louder. My feet froze on the ground. That little white hand was still there, gripping the iron of the highest cabin, too small to be an adult's. The Ferris wheel creaked, its old metal creaking as if someone was moving up there. My body told me to run, but my eyes were fixed there. Then the hand disappeared. Silence fell over the park, and in the next instant, the lights of the Ferris wheel came on. My heart almost stopped. The bulbs, which shouldn't have worked for decades, shone with a dull yellow light. The wheel began to turn, alone, no wind, no electricity. My lungs burned. This was not possible. Then I saw it. In the third cabin from the top, a childlike silhouette, small, thin, sitting still, with its head tilted slightly to the side. His feet dangled in the air. Fear tightened my throat. The missing child. Was it possible? I took a step forward, trying to get a better look. The figure moved, and then his eyes glowed in the darkness. My muscles locked. The wheel kept turning, slow, steady. With each turn, the silhouette seemed closer. The laughter returned. But now, it came from behind me. My blood ran cold. I swung the flashlight, sweeping the darkness. Nothing, but I felt it. Something was there. The laughter turned to whispers, unintelligible words, children's voices murmuring around me. The flashlight flickered, and for an instant, I saw it. Children, pale, small, with dark, sunken eyes, all around me. Their laughter echoed like a buzzing in my head. The Ferris wheel spun faster. The cabins shook violently. A cold hand grabbed my wrist. I jumped back, trying to free myself. But there was no one there. The whispers grew louder. "Play with us." The whispered phrase repeated itself, merging with the noise of the dead park. And then, the wheel stopped. My gaze slowly rose. The highest cabin was empty. The child was no longer there. The laughter echoed again, this time right next to me. A shiver ran down my spine. My body wanted to run, but my eyes turned on their own. And then, I saw her. A little girl, dirty dress, hair stuck to her pale face, bare feet. Her smile was wrong. Her mouth was open too wide. Her eyes were black. She held my hand. The cold, thin fingers pressed against my skin. "Now it's your turn." The Ferris wheel began to spin again, but now I was inside it. The next morning, the few curious people who still passed by the abandoned park noticed something different. The Ferris wheel was no longer motionless. It was spinning slowly, as if someone were inside one of the cabins. And if you got close enough, they say you could hear children's laughter, and among them, a new laugh. It all started with a whisper at the bar. I was in Las Vegas, drinking alone, when a man in a wrinkled suit sat down next to me and whispered, "Have you heard of the underground circus?" I frowned. Circus? Underneath the city? I thought he was joking, but the way he was looking at me, it wasn't a joke. "There's no ticket, there's no address," he continued, his eyes wide. "If the circus wants you, it'll find you." I laughed, but that very night, it found me. I left the bar around 2 in the morning. The strip was crowded, bright, alive, but the moment I turned down a side street, the world went silent. I looked around, no cars, no music, no voices, like I'd left the city without realizing it. Then I saw something on the ground, a black note folded in half. My heart raced. There was no one around. I took the paper with trembling hands and opened it. 3 words were written in gold: "Come down." It was then that I noticed an open manhole cover just in front of me. A ladder led down into a dark hole, cold, silent. I took a step back. This had to be a prank, but before I could turn around, a song began to play, low, strange, a distorted waltz coming from the darkness. The note in my hand grew warm. Then I heard laughter, low, far away, coming from beneath the city. My breath caught. I should leave, but my feet were already on the ladder, down, into the circus. The staircase seemed endless. The smell of damp earth and rust filled the air. The waltz continued to play, but now it sounded clearer, as if an invisible orchestra was waiting for me down there. My chest tightened with each step. Something was pulling me deeper. And then I arrived. The tunnel opened into an immense space, an underground circus. The ceiling was a dark dome, studded with tiny lights that looked like stars. The red and gold canvas stretched around it, closing off that secret world. There were bleachers, packed full, but the people didn't move. I froze. Their faces were frozen in bizarre expressions of joy. Some were smiling too wide, others were wide-eyed. No one blinked. No one breathed. A shiver ran down my spine. What the hell was that? The music stopped, and a deep voice echoed in the ring. "Ladies and gentlemen, the show is about to begin." I turned around. A tall man, dressed in a shiny black suit and top hat, appeared in the center of the ring. His eyes were too deep, too dark. "Today we have a special surprise." He spread his arms wide. "Our guest of honor has finally arrived." The blood ran cold in my veins. He was talking about me. The motionless audience applauded, but the sounds of their clapping didn't match the movements of their hands. Bile rose in my throat. I had to get out of there. I spun on my heels, looking for an exit. The bleachers were closer now. Number that wasn't possible. I took a step back. The frozen crowd turned their heads in unison. The sound of bones cracking filled the air. The master of ceremonies smiled. "Now, let the show continue." The lights flickered, and the next moment, I was in the middle of the ring. The crowd stared at me, waiting. The darkness swallowed me. The next morning, a city worker found a folded black note on the ground near an open manhole cover. He picked it up and read the 3 golden words, "Come down." That night, the underground circus opened its doors again, and a new show began.